The air on Karl's farm always smelled like rich earth and last night's rain. A good, honest smell that seeped into the very wood of his barn and the wool of his old, familiar coat. It was one of those crisp early mornings where the mist still hung low in the hollows and the world felt like it was holding its breath before the full heat of the day. Karl, a man of routine and steady pace, he'd been farming for over 40 years, and you don't change a good rhythm just because the calendar flipped, was on his way to the south pasture. The old split-rail fence there had taken a nasty blow during the last big storm, and he needed to check the damage before the cows decided a change of scenery was in order. He was moving with that slightly bow-legged, deliberate gait that comes from a lifetime of hauling feed sacks and mending stubborn machinery. His plaid shirt, a deep, faded red and blue, was tucked into his sturdy denim overalls, which were faded and patched in all the right places, telling their own silent story of hard work. The sun was just peeking over the eastern ridge, casting long, sharp shadows, and it was one of those shadows, or rather, a small, very solid interruption in his shadow that made Karl pause mid-step. He glanced down, not really expecting anything more than a stray barn cat, or maybe a particularly bold field mouse. What he saw instead made the old man let out a soft, surprised grunt. Right by his heavy work boots, almost pressed against the leather, stood a foal. Not one of his foals, mind you. Karl didn't have any horses on his farm anymore, hadn't since his old mare, Bess, had passed 5 years back. This one was small, maybe only a couple of months old at most, a dusty, unremarkable brown color, and looked utterly out of place. It was skinny, too, not sickly, but certainly not well fed, with wide, nervous eyes that were currently fixed on Karl's overall-covered knees, as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Well now," Karl muttered, his voice a low rumble, the first words spoken on the farm that morning. He slowly squatted down, wincing a little, as his knees protested the sudden movement. "Where in the good heck did you sprout from, little fella?" The foal didn't bolt, which Karl found fascinating. Most young wild things, even if lost, would have taken off like a shot the moment a human came within 10 feet. This one just shifted its weight, a slight tremor running through its spindly legs, and let out a tiny, high-pitched whicker that sounded more like a rusty gate hinge than a horse. Karl held his hand out, palm up, keeping his movements slow and predictable. The foal hesitantly stretched its neck forward, nudged his open palm with a soft, velvet nose, and then, inexplicably, let out a satisfied sigh, almost leaning into the familiar scent of old leather and sweat that clung to Karl's hand. "You're a stray, aren't you?" Karl said, his tone more contemplative than accusatory. "Must have gotten separated. Well, you can't stay here, young'un. Farm life ain't easy, and I ain't equipped for horses anymore." He stood up and started to walk toward the broken fence section. The foal, instead of staying put, simply adjusted its stance and followed. It kept a distance of about 3 feet, perfectly mimicking Karl's slightly uneven pace. Karl tried to shoo it off. "Go on, get. Find your mama." The foal stopped, lowered its head, and then, as soon as Karl resumed walking, it started again, right behind him. By the time Karl reached the section of broken fence, he realized he wasn't just dealing with a lost animal. He was dealing with one that had seemingly imprinted on him. Maybe he had been the first kind face it had seen since getting lost. Or maybe it was just too tired and frightened to wander alone. Whatever the reason, this small, dusty brown creature had made a decision. Karl was its new herd. "All right, you stubborn little dust mop," he sighed, scratching his stubbled chin. "Just for the day. We'll try to find where you belong. But if we can't, well, we'll figure it out then." The foal whickered again, a little louder this time, and nudged Karl's worn overalls with its head. Karl smiled, a rare and fleeting expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Let's call you Digger, because you dug yourself right into my morning plans." And so began the unusual partnership between a solitary farmer and his unexpected shadow. Karl had a schedule. It was a sturdy, reliable thing, a framework built on decades of rising before the sun and working until the stars were the only light left. Digger, the small, utterly clueless foal, had turned that schedule into a damp, wrinkled piece of paper in less than 2 hours. The first big issue was the morning chores. Usually, Karl would simply open the barn doors, let the cows shuffle out to the pasture, and then get to the milking. But this morning, every time Karl moved toward the latch, Digger, who had been tied loosely with a spare bit of rope to a sturdy post outside, would let out a desperate, panicked cry. The noise was surprisingly loud for such a small creature, and it spooked the cows. Henrietta, his most reliable Jersey, balked at the door. Karl untied the rope and tried to lead the foal back to the barn. Predictably, Digger didn't lead. He simply followed, sticking so close that Karl kept accidentally kicking the foal's surprisingly large feet. The second issue was the search itself. He stomped into the house, Digger tiptoeing gingerly across the wooden porch floor behind him. Karl snatched the old rotary phone off the wall, dialing Mrs. Peterson, his nearest neighbor. "Morning, Ethel. It's Karl," he started. "Say, have you heard anything? Anyone lose a foal? Small thing, brown, looks like a walking dust bunny." Ethel hadn't seen a thing. Karl tried 2 other neighbors, the Miller family and old Mr. Henderson. No one had heard of a missing foal. The phone calls took up valuable time, and by the time Karl finally got back outside, the sun was high. He walked back to the barn, deciding to finish the milking before tackling the pasture repair. Digger followed, of course. The third issue arose when Karl turned his back for just a moment to grab a clean cloth. Digger, in his boundless, curious innocence, decided the best place to stand was directly underneath the single milk collection hose. Karl turned around just in time to see Digger flinch, knocking the hose loose from the bucket. A thick, creamy jet of fresh milk sprayed out, hitting the barn wall, the floor, and most disastrously, splashing all over Karl's clean overalls. "Oh, for the love of Digger!" Karl roared, his patience snapping like a dry twig. The foal froze, eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. He let out that same heartbreaking, rusty gate wicker, turned on a dime, and bolted out of the barn door. Karl stood there, covered in warm milk, furious. He should just let it go. But then, he saw the deep, wet skid marks on the dirt floor, where Digger's tiny hooves had scrambled for traction, and the faint, high wicker echoing from somewhere out in the yard. The anger faded, replaced by that stubborn tug of responsibility. He walked back out into the sun. Digger was hiding behind the biggest oak tree near the house, only his head and one nervous eye visible. Karl knelt down near the tree. "It's all right, fella. Just scared me, that's all. Come on." Digger waited, watching. When Karl turned his back and started walking toward the house, Digger gave one last nervous look at the oak tree and followed. He kept a respectful, slightly larger distance now. He was learning. "Now we fix that fence. And you, Digger, you stay put. You so much as look at a tool, and I'm sending you to live with Ethel." The sun was beginning its slow, golden descent, painting the south pasture in hues of amber and rose. Karl's patience, already frayed, was wearing dangerously thin as he wrestled with the broken fence line. The problem was Digger. Karl would hammer a fresh post into the rocky ground, and Digger would be right there, sniffing the tool bucket, inevitably bumping Karl's elbow. Karl noticed, with a sudden pang of pity, just how tired the foal looked. He was skinny too, with a nasty, raw-looking scrape ran along his shoulder. Karl reached out and gently rubbed the painful spot. Digger leaned into the touch, a small tremor running through his body, and let out a faint, pitiful sound, a sound that spoke of days of fear and hunger. It was this moment of vulnerability, this utter silence of trust, that broke Karl's resolve. This wasn't just a stray animal. This was a baby on the brink. "Oh, you poor scrap," Karl whispered. He was about to scoop the foal into his arms when the sound hit them. A sharp, high-pitched yip from the thicket of trees. Karl instantly went rigid. Coyotes! Digger heard it too. The little horse's head snapped up, his eyes wide and dark with sudden primal terror. He didn't run. He pressed himself against Karl's leg, trembling so violently the farmer could feel the rapid pulse drumming against his worn denim. 2 large, mangy coyotes slunk out of the shadows. Karl didn't think. He acted. He snatched up the heavy, splintered fence post lying beside him. With a roar that surprised even himself, a sound fueled by instinct and a sudden, fierce protectiveness, Karl launched himself forward, placing his entire body between the foals and the predators. Get out of here, you scavengers!" he bellowed, swinging the post with terrifying force. The coyotes, startled by the sudden, massive aggression, skittered back and vanished into the darkening woods. Karl stood there for a long minute, breathing heavily. He slowly turned back. Digger was still huddled near the fence post, absolutely still. When Karl slowly lowered the heavy oak post, Digger took a hesitant, trembling step forward. The foal didn't run, didn't whicker. He simply walked straight to Karl, put his head against the farmer's chest, and pressed with all his small weight. Karl dropped the post and wrapped his arms around the foal's neck, burying his face in the dusty brown mane. The desperate, shaking terror of the little animal was transmitted directly to Karl. "It's okay, Digger. It's okay now," Karl murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He realized then that he had become the owner. He pulled Digger closer. He needed me. That thought settled deep into Karl's weary soul. The barn, usually a place of busy, daytime sounds, was silent and still in the deepening twilight. Karl had prepared the largest stall and hung a single, warm yellow bulb overhead. Digger, still trembling intermittently from the coyote encounter, was tucked inside. Karl set down a bucket of fresh water and a separate low pan of warm milk. The foal was too frightened to drink properly. Karl knelt on the straw and dipped his fingers into the warm, sweet milk. He gently guided his wet fingers to Digger's mouth. It took a painful 20 minutes of this slow, finger-fed process before Digger finally lowered his head to the pan and began to drink. Karl's gaze fell on the cut on Digger's flank. Infections could kill a young animal, and Karl wasn't going to risk it. He retrieved a small bottle of antiseptic and a clean rag. As Karl dabbed the cool, stinging antiseptic onto the raw skin, Digger let out a sharp, high-pitched cry that tore straight through the silence of the barn and straight through Karl's heart. He jerked away, scrambling his small hooves against the straw. Karl simply stood still, keeping his hand in a gentle, reassuring position on the foal's neck. I know it stings," Karl whispered, his own eyes suddenly stinging. "But you gotta be strong, fella. I'm not gonna hurt you. Never." When the wound was clean, Digger still trembled, but he didn't run. He leaned into Karl. When the farmer finally moved towards the door, Digger's head lifted immediately, a sharp, panicked whicker escaping him. The thought of being alone was clearly terrifying. Karl sighed and walked over to a stack of old feed sacks and blankets, tossing them into a thick pile directly in the straw, right next to where Digger lay. He settled down onto the makeshift bed. Digger watched him for a beat. Then, with surprising speed, the foal wobbled over, nudged Karl's chest, and gently laid his head down on the straw, resting his body so that it was almost touching the length of the farmer's back. He let out a soft, deep breath and finally, truly, relaxed. Karl lay there, the strange, comforting weight of the foal against him, listening to the soft, steady sound of the young horse's breathing. He reached back and gently scratched behind Digger's soft ear. As the old man finally drifted off to sleep, his last conscious thought was that the hardest work of his life was learning how to be gentle again. The morning after the coyote scare, Karl awoke with a mission. He knew the search was over. Digger was his. The first big reality check was the expense. He called Doc Jenkins, the veterinarian. "A foal, Karl? You, with a horse? You'll be looking at milk replacer. Good quality stuff. It's pricey, Karl." The bill for the supplies and the vet visit was a startling hit to Karl's savings. He paid without argument. The money was just things. Digger was life. The drive to the clinic was an ordeal. Digger cried nearly the entire way, his sharp, distressed whickers agonizing. At the clinic, Digger was terrified of the strange noises and the cold steel table. He fought the needle for the vaccinations. Doc Jenkins, seeing the trauma, was patient. "He's healthy enough, Karl, just severely undernourished and emotionally stressed. He's imprinted on you hard. You're his whole world right now." Back at the farm, Karl had to start training Digger. He approached Digger slowly, holding the new soft leather halter. Karl finally managed to slip the halter on, and Digger immediately panicked. He reared up slightly, pulling back with all his might. Karl held the rope tight, but didn't pull back. He just stood firm, a silent, immovable anchor. For a long, heart-stopping minute, it was a battle of wills. Then, Digger stopped fighting. Karl slowly, gently, slackened the rope. He walked over and stroked Digger's neck. Then, he put his arm around the foal's neck, pulled the small head against his chest, and just held him, humming a low, tuneless melody, an old lullaby his mother used to sing, that he hadn't hummed in 40 years. Digger's resistance finally broke. He leaned completely into Karl, letting out a deep, wrenching sigh that sounded like a sob. Karl held Digger until the tremors stopped. When Karl finally pulled away, he noticed Digger's eyes. They were no longer wild with fear, but soft, trusting. He gently nudged Karl's cheek, a soft, intimate gesture of thanks. Karl knew then that the money, the exhaustion, all of it was worth this singular, profound moment of trust. The morning following the veterinary visit was dedicated to one major stress-inducing task: introducing Digger to the cows. Karl led Digger out to the main pasture. Digger, however, was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer size of the cows. He pulled back violently on the rope and let out a series of frantic, panicked whickers. The cows, led by the matriarch Henrietta, stopped chewing in unison. Digger bolted, dragging Karl several feet before the farmer could brace himself. The lead rope slipped, and Digger was momentarily free. The cows started to mill nervously. Digger, absolutely terror-stricken, headed straight for Karl, trying to burrow his entire small body behind the man's legs. Karl found himself instantly surrounded by 6 massive, snorting cows, with a terrified foal using his overalls as a shield. Karl knelt, ignoring the cow muck, and gathered Digger close. The foal was shaking uncontrollably. How am I going to do this? Karl thought, the enormity of his commitment suddenly overwhelming. Later that afternoon, the logistical drama resurfaced in the form of cold, hard numbers. Karl was considering the only thing he had left that might bring in quick cash: his old, beloved, fully restored 1950s Ford tractor. Selling it would guarantee Digger's feed for a year, but it would cripple his fieldwork. The choice was agonizing. He pushed the papers aside and went back out to the barn. Karl sat down on his makeshift straw bed. He began to stroke the foal's coat and found a cluster of painful, crusty scabs hidden beneath the dusty fur. Old wounds. Karl winced, realizing the depth of the foal's previous suffering. He fetched a special, soothing ointment and began to meticulously rub it into the scabs, his large, calloused hands moving with surprising delicacy. Digger's resistance finally broke. He let out a shuddering sigh, his head drooping. As Karl worked the cream into the painful spots, Digger slowly, deliberately, lowered his head all the way until his warm muzzle was resting on Karl's knee. "I trust you with my pain." Karl felt a lump rise in his throat. He gently kissed the top of Digger's head. "We'll figure it out, partner," Karl promised, his voice choked with emotion. Karl, the man who prided himself on self-sufficiency, had to face a humiliating realization. He would sell eggs and honey at the town's farmers' market. The market was a brightly lit, overly cheerful, crowded arena of small talk, the exact opposite of everything Karl valued. He couldn't leave Digger behind due to his acute separation anxiety, so Digger was coming along. Karl tied Digger's lead rope to the leg of his folding table. The foal, now sporting a bright neon yellow protective wrap on his healing scrape, looked like a tiny, nervous beacon of ridiculousness. The first 2 hours were miserable. Karl stood behind his table, arms crossed, mumbling the prices. People bought his goods, but they lingered, not for the honey, but for the foal. Digger instantly pressed himself against Karl's legs, trembling. Karl felt a wave of deep embarrassment. But as the morning wore on, the tide began to turn. People saw Karl's fierce, protective stance and the foal's absolute devotion. A small group of children gathered. One little girl approached tentatively, holding a piece of carrot. Digger was nervous, but the carrot smelled enticing. Karl crouched low, speaking softly into Digger's ear. "It's all right, partner. You gotta be brave. Come on." Karl gently nudged Digger forward. For a long, silent moment, the foal stood at the edge of his fear. Then, Digger stretched out his neck and delicately took the carrot from the girl's hand. The small girl giggled. It was a tiny victory. But for Karl, it felt like an earthquake. The foal had chosen to trust an outsider. Karl's face softened into a quiet, profound pride. He realized this market trip was an investment in Digger's recovery. By the end of the day, his eggs and honey were sold out. As they drove home, Digger was quiet in the back of the truck. "Well, Digger," Karl said, "looks like we're market vendors now. Humiliating, yes. But you earned your keep, little partner." The new life had its own rhythm, but Karl's world was still centered on Digger. The foal was growing, his spirit becoming sturdy and bold. Karl had become a man devoted to teaching Digger about life beyond trauma. One afternoon, Karl sat in the sun outside the barn. Digger was lying nearby, chewing on a straw. Suddenly, the foal sprang up, snorted, and began to scamp. It was pure, beautiful joy. Karl watched, feeling a powerful wave of pride. Into this idyllic world roared a dark blue pickup truck. Sheriff Gilbertson stepped out. "Listen, Karl, we got a call. Says she knows this foal. Claims he belongs to a ranch about 50 miles north of here." Karl looked down at Digger. There was a small, distinctive white blaze on his forehead. The evidence was damning. "She's probably mistaken," Karl insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "But I have to follow up, Karl. It's a matter of law. I need to take him to the impound lot just until we can confirm ownership." Digger, sensing the threat of separation, let out a piercing, distressed cry. He pressed against Karl with desperate force. "No," Karl said, the word cutting through the quiet afternoon air. "You're not taking him. You want to confirm ownership? Fine. You get that woman and the people from the ranch out here. You bring them to my barn. If he walks up to them, if he leaves my side for them, then you can take him. But until then, he stays right here, safe with me." After a long, agonizing silence, the sheriff sighed. "I'll be back tomorrow, Karl. And if they show up, and they've got the papers, he's theirs. Understood?" Karl nodded, the bitter dread of impending loss settling deep in his soul. The night after Sheriff Gilbertson's visit was the longest and most agonizing of Karl's life. Sleep was impossible. Digger was restless, sensing the shift. He kept nudging Karl's hand. Karl sat on the straw, pulling Digger's head into his lap. He stroked the foal's muzzle, tracing the faint, distinctive white blaze, the mark that the ranch owner would use to claim him. "I fought for you, partner," Karl whispered into the dark, his voice thick and rough. Around midnight, Karl realized that he was clutching Digger so tightly, the foal was beginning to squirm. He loosened his embrace. Digger pressed his warm, solid body against Karl's side, completely surrendering. At exactly 9 a.m., the roar of 2 separate engines broke the farm's silence. Sheriff Gilbertson arrived, followed closely by a gleaming black SUV belonging to the ranch owners. Karl met them outside the barn doors. Digger pressed tightly against his leg. Mr. Harrington, the tall ranch owner, immediately pointed to the foal. "It is him. The blaze is unmistakable." Mrs. Davies, the ranch manager, tried to sound soothing. "Come here, baby. You're coming home." Digger didn't move. His eyes were glued to Karl's face. Mr. Harrington, impatient, reached out a hand to grab the lead rope. At that exact moment, Digger let out a raw, desperate, high-pitched scream of pure terror, the sound of an animal truly believing it was about to be abandoned. He threw himself against Karl's chest. "Look at him!" Karl roared, his voice cracking with emotion. "He's not just a stray. He's been through trauma. You take him now, and you break him forever." Mrs. Davies visibly flinched at the foal's profound distress. She looked at Karl. "Farmer, what do you want?" Karl took a shaky breath. "I want to buy him. Name your price. He stays here, where he feels safe." Mrs. Davies intervened. "We'll sell him to you for a symbolic sum. But you must promise us one thing, farmer. You must promise that you will take good, professional care of him." Karl looked down at the foal. Tears finally streamed down his weathered cheeks. "I promise," Karl whispered, his voice catching. "I promise. I'll give him my whole life." The day the ranch owners left was the true start of Karl and Digger's life together. The trauma of the near loss solidified their bond into something unbreakable. Digger grew into a magnificent, medium-sized horse, strong and loyal, still exhibiting that fierce, absolute devotion to the man who saved him. Karl's hair grew whiter, his steps a little slower, but he was sustained by the constant, demanding presence of the horse. The market trips became a ritual. Karl, once a man who avoided all talk, found himself quietly, gruffly answering questions about the horse, his pride evident in every terse reply. He had saved not just the foal, but himself. Digger had dragged Karl out of a comfortable rut of loneliness. One evening, Karl was sitting on his porch swing, watching the sun dip below the far ridge. Digger was grazing nearby. He stopped chewing, lifted his head, and looked directly at Karl. Karl raised his hand and offered a slow, steady wave. Digger let out a soft, low whicker, a sound that was pure contentment, and went back to his grass. Karl finally understood. He hadn't just gotten a horse, he had gotten a new purpose. His life, once a predictable, lonely march, was now a beautiful, messy, and infinitely precious journey, all because of the little foal who simply refused to leave his side.